Welcome, everybody, to Resilience MD. It's where we explore unconventional journeys through medical training and careers. I'm Dr. Osuji, your host, and we have a very special guest on our show today, Dr. Evans Osuji, the Dr. Evans Osuji. He is a current internal medicine resident at the Johns Hopkins University, and he is going to share with us today his very unique path from a career in athletics into medicine. So, Dr. Osuji, welcome. Good to have you.
Thanks, Dr. O. Really appreciate it.
Can you just kind of tell us a little bit about your start and how you even got into medicine in the first place? Did you always have an interest in medicine, and what helped you develop that passion that you have now?
Yeah. So, as you, I think, accurately stated, origin background originates definitely with athletics more than academics. I mean, academics were always something that I was privy to, something that I always thought was important coming from the family that I came from. And you, as my biggest sister, leading the way. Never something that I didn't take pride in, but I had different sights and goals, I think, for myself, different aspirations. Basketball and football were the main things that I really aspired to excel in and really probably take a career and maybe even professionally if I was fortunate enough to. So I think that's kind of a good foundation, a good background to set things up. Where medicine came in, probably in college, I was fortunate to have some general understanding background, I think, in the domain of medicine, with my mom being a nurse, and then you also pursuing a career in medicine. At the time, I wasn't really paying much attention to it, transparently, because I was trying to forge my own way. And so I think I kind of recreated my own way, kind of had, set the tone to, for lack of better words, build my own path through some of my own experiences, really, that occurred, I would say, in college, probably, which ironically happened really by way of athletics.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I think you're being very, very humble and you gave a very good overview, but just because I know you as well as I know you. So you started at James Madison. You didn't really have aspirations of medicine to start out with. Isn't that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Your aspirations, if I remember correctly, I remember growing up and you were gung-ho on wanting to go into the NFL.
That's correct.
So much so that you were you were varsity of the basketball team and the football team at one point at the same time in high school, which was unheard of in our town.
Yeah.
And then even a star athlete to where you were one of the top players in the state. By the time you were ready to get off to college, you had, I remember, stacks of recruiters, letters wanting you to come to their school, to various universities, various scholarships for sports. Kind of walk us through why that kind of changed when you got to James Madison. You were playing on the football team on scholarship. What happened?
Yeah. I mean, like you said, sports. And, it's funny because a part of that has never died inside of me. I still love sports. I still, not all my teammates, but a majority of my teammates, I still keep in contact with. Sports are definitely still very near and dear. Every time I can turn on ESPN and catch a game, it's a good time when I'm outside of the hospital, even today. Yeah, a lot of the things you said are right. I was fortunate. I was a pretty good player in high school. Basketball and football were the two things that I primarily played. I was on varsity all 4 years for both sports, captain for 3 years, or for 2 years of those 3 years, until started for 3. By the time I finished, I was a top player in the state for football, and I was fortunate to receive several scholarships and ultimately chose James Madison, an institution that I would pursue field and pursue my academic as well as athletic career in. Now, here's where I think things kind of transition. So came into college, and the thing about college football and sports is that, you go in bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and I would bet or argue, maybe to suggest that rarely does anybody go on a full scholarship and not have aspirations to play or advance their career in some way, shape, or form. So that honestly is what I wanted to do. That absolutely is where I wanted to go. And I do feel like I had the potential. I think the setup was appropriate. I feel like I was progressing and I was being, taught and nurtured in a great way. James Madison did a very good job in that. I had a coaching staff that did a good job in that. But I started to experience things that I did not experience in high school, and that was injuries. that was the primary reason as to, I think, why things transitioned really early on, actually, in my career. So my redshirt freshman year is the first year that I suffered a very severe major injury. I tore my ACL, I tore my MCL, and it was early on in the season, and it was very devastating. It was highly emotional. It was an experience that I had never really understood or had undergone. It was something kind of felt like one of those situations where you see it in the news and it's like, oh my gosh, but you never think that it could be you. And then it was me. And that was tough. That was something that was really tough to have to experience because it's a year of sitting out. It's a year of trying to rediscover some other things. I wasn't filling my time with athletics anymore. So I had to discover other things, whether that be me in the training room or whatever it be may have you. I had to do a lot of those things. So that was the first time that happened. And, unfortunate for me, fortunate or unfortunate for me, there are a total of three major knee injuries or major surgeries that I sustained while playing college football. I still love the game, still love football. I understand that it's a part of football, but it's unfortunate that that was the case for me. I think one of the best things that could have happened to me in the setting of all this was one, that I had great community. So I had a great big sister that I was able to kind of like lean on
Shout out
when
to
some of it
community.
happens. I had I had two great parents that were guiding me. And then I had siblings and a village that spoke a lot of life into me, which at a time, which I would probably argue was probably my low point in my life, probably one of the toughest times in my life. But just guiding me and, helping me like recreate a story that would make sense. And that I think was the best for me. So I think it was a combination of that. And then also seeing, some of these doctors that were taking care of me, that were doing all the things, the surgeons that were working with their hands, the anesthesiologists that were seeing me through the surgery, and just all the providers, I think, that I was exposed to in a way that I had not been exposed to. When I was a youth, I was exposed to coaches, and this was a space now that was new to me. And I remember very vividly being on crutches and not being able to walk, and then coming out of surgery and let's say 6 to 8 weeks after some intervention that I didn't, have any exposure, following up with these doctors and now being able to walk, like restoration of function. And I just thought that was so magical. And I just thought that I remember so well thinking in my mind that like, one, this was a terrible experience for me, but I want one day for there to be some situation or circumstance whereby if it is the case that something like this happens to somebody else, I would be honored to be the person that could, give them a hug, maybe speak some life into them, tell them that it's going to be okay, because it was okay and it is okay. And so I think that was probably the silver lining of the transition. Seeing this avenue or really this space that I could take advantage of or leverage that would make a lot of sense for me. And I thought was honestly pretty interesting. I think the interest in medicine, the interest in science was already there. This was, I think, probably the catalyst for everything.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's so awesome to see that you were able to put such a positive spin on what was certainly a situation that a lot of people might not have been able to turn around and pivot on. You've been involved from an extracurricular standpoint since college. I mean, you were in the laboratory as was it a cell molecular biology? You were one of the research assistants from even when you were at James Madison. You were on multiple advisory committees. Can you talk about how extracurriculars in college played a role as you advanced through your career, starting from college? And then I actually also want to more so touch on when you came into college, what were your expectations in terms of what you were going to do with your education? Was it more like you were just, okay, you got a scholarship, you were in school, you were just kind of going through the motions and your focus was football? And then how did that change after your injury?
So yeah, I love that. I think I'll try and digest this one by one because I think there's a lot to talk about here.
For sure.
I chose James Madison for several reasons. One, because of course it was a Division I academic institution that had a name that I felt like could get me where I wanted to go. But the academic part was also something that was very important to me. And it was a good academic institution. So I knew that if in the case that for whatever reason, sports didn't work out, I knew that I could rely on the fact that I went to an institution where I could be proud of and hold on to the fact that I got a solid education. And I do believe that I got a very solid education at James Madison. going back to what my expectations were with respect to like coming into college, honestly, I took it like, I mean, the advice that I had gotten going in college was that this was like a time to discover. There's like a lot of self discovery, I think, that happens. And so that's really what I was doing. I mean, probably the first 1 or 2 years was me just trying to maximize like how good of a student I could be, getting through my gen ed courses, doing good in math, doing good in English, doing good in history. And I think that that's probably where I was at. It's interesting kind of how the whole thing played out because where the adversity came is where I think decisions actually needed to be made. So that's, I think, where the transition came. But I think that my expectations with respect to like a career, I mean, there's a lot of things that you think about when people grow up. Oh, I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a professor. All of those things, definitely. I wanted to, and I had heard about all those things, but I think because I had been so focused on one, I was very narrow minded. Because I was very focused on one thing for so long, I had never given myself a true chance, I would say, to actually see what these things, like how these things work out. So political science, classes like that, this was truly my first exposure to some of these things. And so, I mean, I was scratching to see if there was anything that would stick and that was really, I think what I'm trying to say more than anything is that was probably a majority of the first year. One, just kind of immersing myself in college. There's a lot that goes on for any student. One period coming into college there's a very steep learning curve, and then I think in combination with that, when you're a student athlete, which I believe is a full time job, it only makes things much harder. So that I think probably explains where I was. I was just a bright eyed, bushy tailed guy, willing to learn, soak things up, and then if anything made sense, I was somebody that was going to, pursue it. But I don't think I had gotten necessarily to the point where I had found something and said, this is exactly what I want to do. Not at least until, things kind of started to shape their way. I think the second thing that I'll try and pivot into is the question of being like involvement is something that I think that you suggested. And I have this philosophy about just not only myself, but just people in general. There were times where I was in college, there are times where I'm in the hospital where people say, oh, that's Evan, he's a doctor. Or like, oh, that's Evan, he's a football player. And I have always, there's been, to me, it's appreciated, but it's a little distasteful to me to be characterized as like a one-dimensional person. I've never wanted to be characterized. I had this firm belief that if I were to suddenly get ill and pass away, and people remembered me as Evans, the football player, I would feel like there was a level of fulfillment in my life or a level of whatever in my life that wasn't met. I would love for somebody to say, this was Evans. He played football. He was a doctor. He was a leader. I would love for somebody to characterize all my things rather than to kind of make me a one-dimensional stick figure type of person. And so I think that's where the involvement comes from. It's one, like seeking out things and being curious. And then two, trying to stretch yourself and pursue other things that are meaningful to you and that make sense. I think that's the other component of it. I see myself as a leader, honestly. So pursuing things and wanting to be involved in things is probably like I think is the other arm of the thing of what I'm suggesting or saying that plays a role in this.
That's so good. And definitely leadership shows itself very evidently in your tenure through your career, through education, through your medical education and training at this point, starting as early as high school. For sure, you've always demonstrated leadership qualities. Could you tell us just a little bit more about, if you could delve? So you talked about your interests in terms of education when you started college, but at that point where you knew, okay, the sports is not going to really happen the way I thought it was going to happen. What did you turn to kind of get more serious and really dig your heels in as a pre-med? And at what point, can you tell us a little bit about your track? Because at one point you were with a kinesiology major and then eventually ended up switching to biology. So can you talk about that path and that transition and what led to that change in terms of the courses that you wanted to take? And did you have any outside support kind of giving you guidance in terms of how you would shape the rest of your college career?
Yeah. Okay. That's a great point. So disclosure, I changed my major 3 times in college.
Oh, what were you when you came in?
Yeah. So kinesiology, biology, health science.
Okay.
changed my major 3 times. And that I think was part of like self-exploration because it wasn't also the other thing is that it wasn't because I wanted to know. I just wanted to, people when you're in college and your people are excited, it's hey, like physical therapy is like super exciting. Like you can do this and this and this. Or hey, like, being a physician assistant is like super exciting. Or OT or nursing is like hot right now. And I think the most important thing is to experience things for yourself, I guess is maybe what I'll say. And I think what I found myself doing because I wasn't doing the work myself was that I would hear something that was hot and I did believe was interesting, might not necessarily identify with exactly what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go. So kinesiology was like sports science, I think was where I was going. I had heard that and I was like, wow, like this is really cool. But then thinking about it more, not necessarily sure if that is exactly what I want to do with the rest of my life. Biology, I thought was great, and biology is great. I don't know if I necessarily enjoyed, some of the courses, like plant biology to me wasn't super exciting. Health science for me ultimately is what I graduated with because I felt like I was learning a lot of hard science things, but then also softer science things and things that I felt like were directly applicable once I graduated. Epidemiology and like the science of studies of illnesses and things and general basic research, clinical versus basic science and like how to implement and take advantage of things like that. Those are the type of courses I was learning or things that I was learning as a health science major. And I just felt like was very interesting. I think I have already mentioned the fact, but I'll just reiterate so that like the audience is aware that it was not when I made the transition to do medicine, and by medicine I mean specifically pursue my MD. I had considered several other things prior to that. So the entire gamut of medicine. I knew that I wanted to do healthcare because of the circumstances, but I had sought out, and at that point in time, I had done my research, I would say, on everything else that was probably around it. So nursing, PT, OT, PA, being an NP, all of these things, I had taken time and really sorted out what exactly it meant as a career and how it made sense inside of my life and in terms of how I identify. And I went through them one by one. At one point, I actually was a PA major. I remember that actually, but then decided that it wasn't something that I wanted to do. Not because there's anything wrong with being a physician assistant, but it just wasn't necessarily something that I think I wanted to do. So I think that kind of settled that right there. The question, I'm sorry, you might have to prompt me again, Prisca. There's a really important part that I wanted to get to, but I think I missed the first part of your question.
No, I think you pretty much answered it. It was what were your intentions and goals in terms of education when you first started college? And then the second part was how did that change after your injury and you kind of had to become more direct about your aspirations as a pre-med track candidate? And then how did your extracurriculars play into your decision, your growth, and ultimately, basically, where you are now? I think you answered all three.
I think there's one element that I did want to answer if you
Is it maybe on the leadership?
So the question of like, how did I transition, the whole transition from academics into athletics. So I think that that's something that's also, because I've actually been asked that question quite a couple times in my life, but my time was limited. I found myself dividing my time. It's very difficult. I won't say it's impossible. It's not impossible because I did it, but you find it's very difficult to divide your attention, your time. Finding yourself as a student, dividing your time in a time where you're growing up and you're still trying to, there's like self-discovery, but dividing my attention between athletics and academics. And so maybe the next man, could be the person that gets the 4.0 and that also, excels in sports. I wasn't that guy. I think I was okay. I wasn't that guy, but I was somebody that was able to hold both, at least decently. But when unfortunate circumstances occurred, I was able to take advantage of the time. That I think that was one of the most important things. I was able to take advantage of the time that I now had. I remember telling myself if I wasn't going to be an All-American on the field, then I was going to be an academic All-American in the classroom. And that was tremendous for me. Me just having this new amount of, I was always somebody that was like, go hard or go home and all these things. But there was this extra push, this extra oomph that I feel like I had that I owed myself because of certain circumstances. I talked to myself a lot. I still do talk to myself a lot, but I would tell myself all the time, this has happened and you had maybe less control of that situation, but you have all control of this next situation that you're going into. And there's really no excuse as to why you can't excel like the next person that's in these classes. And that's what I told myself. And I think that was something that was very, very important for me. That, and then also just kind of learning the identity, the culture of what it looked like to be a pre-med student and diving into that. So all those things were very helpful. And I found myself being very successful, challenging myself. I stopped comparing myself to the people that were around me. If somebody was getting a B, I wasn't looking at the person like, oh, well, you got a B. So if I got a B, I'm okay. No, I started actually comparing myself to myself. And I found myself, instead of getting a B, getting A's. So I think that's the other really important part that I think was very helpful for myself.
That's awesome. And that actually speaks to something else I kind of like to tease out in these interviews, because so often it's a matter of mindset in terms of the early careers of medical trainees that find adversity in their tenure and are able to make these incredible stories. Oftentimes it is a matter of mindset. And so for you, after you had that injury and you had the mindset, well, this has happened. I'm not going to be an All-American. Maybe I won't be an All-American on the field, but I will be an All-American in the classroom. I find that very remarkable, in that a lot of folks might have just said, oh, well, this has happened and my life is over and I'm just going to coast through the rest of my college career, and what happens, happens. A lot of people might have had that mindset, but you didn't. So can you tell the audience a little bit about, where does that come from? Where does that tenacity kind of come from, do you think?
Having a great big sister, having two, having two great. I think part of it is, honestly, I think part of it is cultural.
Mm,
I will say I had two really, really excellent parents that they raised us really well. And
shout out to mom and dad.
I had, yeah, shout out to mom and dad. There was a lot of adversity that I had experienced, I think, of just dealing with mom and dad. The things that they were saying, some of the things they would do. I think some of it is that. But then even like them going through tough times, I saw my parents go through tough times. And, I wasn't like naive to tough times, but I had seen tough times before, and I had seen people that knew how to speak life into people with tough times. And, there are people that are around me that I really, really respected and trusted their guidance. And they told me everything was going to be okay. It was tough to see, but I had to, even when I didn't believe in myself, I knew that there were other people that were believing myself until I could get back on my feet
Mhm.
and start believing in myself again. And I think that part was really important. Really, what I'm saying is I was very, very fortunate to come from the circumstances that I came from. My culture, maybe one, being Nigerian and just being really proud and thinking that I can do anything in the world. There's nothing that I can't do, because that's like how I was raised. And then, the training, of course, from my parents. And then I think a lot of it I appreciate is from my siblings. And, Priska, you played on, I'll say, some of your podcasts, we had several conversations about really tough times of my life.
Yes, we did.
And I was down bad. I was
We
down
did.
bad. And, in the library, trying to get my life together, learning Orgo or, this or that thing, when things weren't making sense. And you was like a role model, someone that had did it, which at the time I felt like you were a superwoman. I still do think you're a superwoman, but at the time I felt like, I
Yep.
was like, Priska is, I'm Evans and Priska is Priska. Whatever Priska does is what she does. Like, that's not me. And not really understanding that the only difference is that she truly believes that she can do this stuff. She doesn't have two heads like my parents say, or like our parents say. She actually doesn't have two heads. I had to learn that myself, and learn that she is actually just a product of the hard work that she's put in for years. And so I started actualizing that stuff. And when I started to actually see like return on my investment, it's like a feed forward mechanism that makes you want to move forward. So I saw that, and it just makes you want to do better. When people see and acknowledge, well, actually, Evans actually is pretty smart. It's not that I'm not just a football player. I'm also the academic that knows what I'm talking about, that can teach you a little bit about an S2 reaction in organic chemistry. Or I can be the TA in organic chemistry. I am showing up to the office hours and I do know what I'm talking about. Now, people are coming around and they do want to be a part of the study groups. So I think a lot of that stuff was very, very helpful. But ultimately, I think it started with my village, which I was very fortunate to have.
Okay. So you graduate from James Madison, but you didn't go directly into medical school. So what happened there?
So I was still trying to understand the road to medicine. So I declared medicine, declared it to university. I was going to be a doctor, but didn't completely or quite understand the entire path to become a doctor. And so the application cycle or application season is something that is pretty unique, I think, in medicine, whereby you need about a year's worth of time to prepare to go to school or to apply to school. So what ends up happening with, I would say, a lot of people these days is that they end up taking a gap year. which has become pretty popular and I think is very useful, depending on who you are and where you are and what all it is that you need. And so for me, the thing when I took a look at my application, one of the glaring red flags I feel was research. I had spent a lot of time fixing my GPA, fixing the time doing working clinically, working community activities. But the one thing that I did not really do a lot of was research. So I wanted to make sure that if it was the case that I applied, that I would be a strong applicant or I would be a strong candidate for medical school. And so that's when I started looking at opportunities that would actualize that and make that a reality. So sent a bunch of emails to various programs that I felt like made sense and could bolster my application. And the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland was one of those institutions, giant research institution that's pretty well known, and spent
Okay.
about a year.
Pretty well known, Evans.
That's
Pretty
pretty
well
well
known,
known.
Dr. Osuji.
And
National Institutes of Health. Okay.
the National Institutes of Health.
You. This is
Yeah.
an ongoing theme with this individual, with Dr. Osuji.
Yeah.
Just pretty well. The
And
NIH is pretty well known. But okay, continue.
yeah. Yeah. So I spent about a year and a half there. Long story short. And I wouldn't say it was my first exposure, but it was a great exposure to what hard, basic science research looks like. And then some clinical science as well. It was the first time I, had an opportunity to be in a wet lab and really get down and do some of the things that make the breakthroughs in science that lead to the breakthroughs in medicine. So it was good.
That's great. Can you talk a little bit more about how you found this opportunity? You mentioned that you applied to several different opportunities. What exactly did it take to get into the NIH? Because they aren't just handing out research positions there. It's a tough position to be able to get. So talk about what all that entailed and some of the other places that you tried your hand getting into and maybe didn't necessarily end up going with.
Yeah. I'll be honest. For me, the name I think was pretty important at the time. It was like a go big or go home type of thing. So I was applying to well-known institutions, well-known programs, just places that had research labs or places that were providing opportunities for research that also came with a stipend so that I could function at least for the time being. Where did it come from? So I think I asked you, I think I was asking Chelsea as well, if there was anything that made
Dr.
sense.
Chelsea Osuji is
Dr.
our
Osuji,
sister.
excuse me.
Yes.
Yeah.
For
So I
respect.
remember asking the two of you for potential options that made sense. I remember going to my advisors in school and asking them, being very transparent about my situation, my circumstances, kind of laying down my application and saying what all makes sense here, what doesn't make sense here, and taking the good and the bad out of those responses. And then the other part of it was just me being proactive in my own journey and looking for opportunities for research. And the NIH came up several times, and one that I felt was attainable. I think I applied to the other places. So you asked what are other places that I applied to. So the CDC was one that I applied to in like Georgia or Atlanta or something like that. And I didn't want to be that far away from home. I applied to several other academic institutions. Columbia, Yale was like another place that was offering research and had stipends. Places like that had very similar application type situations, but ultimately decided that the NIH was where I wanted to go, I think, because Maryland was a place that was a little bit closer to home. And I think that it was something that would do well in my application. In terms of what it took to get there, I would say hundreds and hundreds of emails. If I'm being honest with you, I applied to a ton of different labs, and it took a lot of either no responses or honestly, some people just kind of telling me off, telling me that this was not something for me, until I was fortunate to receive one opportunity from somebody, one interview that I got. So
That's so good because oftentimes it takes just an exorbitant amount of effort and cold calling and outreach for opportunities. A lot of times folks will say there's nothing out there, but sometimes it takes hundreds, thousands of emails and you'll find something. So that is truly a great example of just that. Tell us a little bit about your time at the NIH. What all did you research? What did you gain from your time there? And you were on leadership there too. You were the social chair for the network of African American fellows while you were there. So talk a little bit about how you came into that leadership position. What did it do for you down the line? No, that's kind of a lot to talk about, but you're best.
Yeah, but it's not a problem. So talking a little bit about the research, it was basic science. It was bench work primarily, but learning a lot of lab techniques. So gel electrophoresis, Western blots, Northern blots, Southern blots, working with cell cultures and HEC293 cells. I remember those very well. Helo cells that are very popular, that's cell line. And the project specifically that I was working with. So when I was in the National Institutes of Health, the important thing to know is that it's not just the National Institutes of Health. There's 27 different branches within the National Institutes of Health. So I was specifically with the NEI, which is the National Eye Institute. So I was doing eye research. Not that I wanted to be an ophthalmologist, but I needed experience. So that was the foundation. And I was just happy to be there and learn. I was absorbing everything like a sponge. But the project that I took on was basically about a protein that my PI, private investigator or principal investigator, had discovered inside of your retina that was responsible for a multitude of functions. Describe it as like a master regulator inside of the retina that was responsible for like differentiation of like cones and rods, cones being like how you see color and then rods being how you see dark and white, and then visual acuity being somewhere in between those. And when that protein specifically was knocked out, then let's just say that your eyesight was not good. So what was interesting actually about the project was that because it worked in a protein complex inside of your eye, several of the proteins that this protein, NRL was the name of the protein, worked in complex with, were actually ubiquitously expressed. So expressed all around your body. But in some odd way, shape, or form, NRL was bringing these proteins together to make your eye do whatever it is. The question that I had, or that was my task, was basically, how does NRL bring in these ubiquitous proteins in so many ways to differentiate cones, rods, and help you see? That was the gist of my project. And the things that I was responsible for doing were the techniques that I've explained. Several other ones that I was taught, but this was several years ago. And it was good. It was good, I would say, to learn some of those techniques. It was good to get a better understanding of research and read research papers and go to conferences and understand their language. It was like learning a new language, but it was good, I would say, to at least appreciate that culture, that lifestyle, just something new. It was difficult, but it was good. I would say ultimately it was a positive experience because it's something that I think I knew that I was going to have to take with me probably through medical school and for the rest of my life, because we all know that medicine is not just medicine, it's also academia, it's also science. And we use some of these things to kind of help forward the field. So that was the positive thing in all of that. The second question about NAF, or the Network of African American Fellows, I'm an extrovert, and coming to a new state, new city, I knew that I was coming here definitely with the primary goal of advancing my career and making sure, ultimately my goal was to go to medical school, but community was something that I sought out deeply. In being here, I looked for community, and who better to look for than, people that look like yourself, the first what you cling to, and found NAF. So started going to some of their, I think, monthly meetings they would have about just like social events. So some happy hours, going to friends' houses, and just like a lot of like-minded people from all around the country. There are people from the University of California and people from Michigan and Florida and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that were all at the NIH. And a lot of them with similar aspirations and goals, honestly, to go to medical school or go to some type of professional school. But it was the NIH kind of served as this centralized circumstance or area where a lot of young professionals that were right out of college could come and socialize. And what actually ended up happening, which is actually amazing now, is that a lot of the people that I met at the National Institutes of Health, I actually still keep in great contact with today. We talk a lot, actually. One of my very, very, very good friends I met at the NIH, and we still keep in contact. So I was actually with him my intern year after medical school and everything. He's still in the area. He's a doctor now as well. And me and him were able to go out and just kind of explore DC some. So it's crazy how some of these things work. Yeah.
That's so great. I can definitely see how community plays such a huge role in where you landed. So that's great.
Yeah.
So you finished at the NIH. Then what?
It was time to apply. Yeah. It was time to apply for medical school. So applied.
Where did you apply?
I applied to I want to say that they were telling me to apply to 18 and 20. I applied to 30, maybe 35 programs.
How did you pick where you applied to?
Great question. Part of it was geographic location. So a lot of programs with some geographic relation to New Jersey. So of course, the Rutgers, Seton Hall, that had just recently created a new school, Hackensack, a lot of programs in New York, Maryland, of course.
And that's because we're from Jersey, huh? You want to
Yeah, I would say so. I would definitely say so. But then there are other places where, you kind of shoot your shot, the Harvards, some other places. Ohio State was a place that I applied to just because I like the idea of Ohio State growing up. I would have loved to be a Buckeye growing up. I think that was another place that I maybe erroneously chose. It wasn't super far from home. It was about 8 hours, but it wasn't in Idaho or something like that. So it was a place that made sense, I think. And ended up finding things. I was looking at some of my stats as well. I compared some stats, but you make your list and you have the places where you shoot your shot. You have places that make sense. And then you of course, apply to other places that you think you have a good chance of getting into. And of those hundreds of medical schools, there were probably 30 that made sense. I mean, there's cost that also was like a limiting factor as well. But I think 30 was like a decent number for me.
It's so interesting that you say that Ohio State was an erroneous decision, and that's where you ultimately ended up
Yeah.
graduating from and growing
Yeah.
into this budding physician. So, but we'll get to that. Talk about what did the application process look like, and how did you ultimately find your way admitted to the Ohio State?
So, well, first of all, I took the MCAT while I was at the NIH 2 times. Took the MCAT twice. I submitted my applications, I think, probably in May. I took the MCAT in April, and then I took it again in August. But I submitted in May with resubmitting my score in August. So start out with submitting an application, and there's 2 different applications that you have to get through. So there's the primary application, which is just a general application that goes to everybody. And from there, I believe the programs, this is like me trying to remember like how med school works. There are 2 applications, and then there's institutions can choose whether or not they want to send a secondary application or they want to reject kind of right then and there. And I did get some rejections, but then also had several secondary applications, which are more tailored questions really to the institutions. A lot of them are essays that ask exactly what your goals are, what your aspirations are, and how it might align with their specific mission statement. That's like such a word that they use, I feel like, in the mission statement, if it aligns with the mission statement. Of course, looking at your stats, and then it was basically those things. And then I feel like I remember hearing something about it being like a courtesy to institutions to return their secondaries within like a 2-week time frame, was something that I feel like I had heard everyone say on Reddit and all these blogs online, like turn it in like 2 weeks or it looks bad. So kind of overwhelming, because when you send 35 and you get, 20 back, and you're going to work every day. It's like you're writing essays and essays and essays and essays to all of these people to make sure that you don't look bad. So that's what a majority of my day, I would say, looked like for at least a month or so, depending on when I got the secondaries back. It was return secondary and then go to work. And then at nighttime, spend a good amount of time working on secondary applications to turn them around, is basically where that happened. Ohio State ended up giving me an application. I got a secondary. I was fortunate. And I'll just jump ship now and share that I actually did not get a lot of love for my secondary applications. I did get secondary applications, but didn't get a lot of interviews.
How
So,
many did you get? Do you remember?
so the only 2 interviews I actually got, I got one from Howard. I remember that. And then I got one from Ohio State,
Yeah. Out of
actually.
30,
Yeah, probably 35.
was that
Probably.
discouraging to you?
It was very discouraging. You get to a point where 26 or 27, this probably isn't happening, because Howard actually came late. Howard, I think, came, I want to say maybe March.
Yeah.
So it's by November, December, you still haven't heard anything. You've gotten rejection. Every time you open up your email, it's like rejection. It's like, okay, maybe I need to go back to the drawing board, and something's wrong with my application. And yeah, so got 2 interviews. I was fortunate to get 2 interviews. One was with Howard, which I interviewed in March. And then the second one actually was with Ohio State in their postbac program. So a program actually called MedPath, which was a special program that they were having at the time. It was a postbac program, but basically for students who they felt missing from the application, whether it be, not strong with PA or it was the MCAT, if there was something that they identified that might, 1 or 2 extra things that they could use for, with a year's time and refine themselves and become somebody that they felt would be a high quality candidate and then gain admission. So I received that application to fill out, which means that I guess I was formally rejected from like the class coming in, and then referred to this program and submitted my application and was actually offered an interview to that program. And I did interview there, ultimately interviewed there, had a great experience, and got acceptance. I want to say maybe in April or May, probably around April, to a postbac program in Ohio.
So I guess most people would have taken that opportunity given that it was kind of like almost an all or nothing kind of shot there. You hadn't quite gotten admission. but they were offering you an opportunity to say, hey, well, we'll give you a year. And then if you do well here for a year, we'll give you a chance. So,
Yeah.
but was that in and of itself, again, was that kind of discouraging? I'm sure maybe other individuals, again, I was playing devil's advocate because you see a lot of people that for whatever reason, they get to a crossroads and they choose a different path and things don't end up working out for them. And then some people choose the path that leads to their success in medicine. And so was it discouraging to you when you got the notification that it would be another year? Because at this point you had taken a gap year and now you were taking another year to potentially
Yeah.
pursue this post-bac. And that was going to be almost 2 years after graduating, at least, before you would get to start as a medical student. So how was that? And what was your mindset around that?
I think that maybe part of what might have softened the blow was the fact that, so it was tough. In an ideal situation, I probably, and maybe in my mind, I was like, well, I'm good enough to go right now. But I think there is some reality that I think that is important to kind of like understand and to face, whereby if you got rejected by X amount of programs or institutions, then you need to, it probably warrants a sit down with somebody that you trust or somebody that, you know, is qualified, that makes sense, to understand like where the red flags are in your application. And so again, by the time I had gotten that offer, I had been rejected by a ton of places, and I was already thinking, well, you know, I probably gonna have to reply anyway.
Mhm.
So, you know, does it make sense for me to reapply with basically the same application, not much changed, or does it make sense for me to take heed to some of the things that I've literally been presented with, and maybe learn a couple more things, take the time to learn a couple more things, and potentially go to to an institution that I would love to be at. And so, yes, definitely, because it did mean another year where I had to kind of spend on the sidelines. But I would say I felt very, very fortunate and saw it as like an opportunity to take advantage of. And I saw it as a challenge really to myself to make sure that I could do this. If they're telling me that these are the parameters by which we need you to do this to gain admission. All right, well, let's do it. Let's make it happen.
That's so
Be here in a year.
that optimism, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So tell me, how was that year? What did you learn and how did you grow and how did that look like?
The year was great. I think more than anything. So it was good because it was a refresher. I was out of school for a year and a half doing research. So I needed to get back into school. And I think refreshing things was just a great kind of way to start off my career in Ohio. I did really well in the program, but I think the academics were of course there. But the two things that I found that were extremely helpful for me were one, that with the community, the foundation I had kind of laid for myself. So a cohort of 15 other people that I already knew, like going to medical school. That's one of the most challenging things I feel like for medical students is when you're coming into school, it's like you're looking to your left and you're looking to your right to find friends and to find community and to make sure that of course you're doing school. That's important, but to also make sure that there's a community, because it can be very isolating in medical school if you don't have the right people around you. It's just a lot. I mean, you hear the saying all the time. It's like drinking water from a fire hose, and it's tough to drink fire from a water hose, but it makes it easier when you have people that are, to your left and to your right that are kind of doing it with you and helping you out in some way, shape, or form. So the community, the cohort, 15 people that I came in with that, again, are some of my best friends to this day. And then I think the familiarity with the institution. So I knew what Ohio State was. I had not gone there for undergrad, but I knew how to get around the hospital. I knew how to get around the medical school. I knew how to get around town, what places to go, what places to eat, where to park. Like I wasn't late to lecture in the morning, when I was in M1 because I knew what streets to park on. Just subtle things like that, I think, were very, very helpful for me, I would say, making my transition into school. And then just maybe having a chip on my shoulder, like, yeah, I just did this. Like, I proved to you guys that I could do this. I belong here. I think those 2.5, 3 things were things that I think were very, very helpful for me anyway, as a transitioning M1, someone coming into medical school.
Amazing. All right. So you transition into medical school. You've now matriculated into medical school at The Ohio State. So tell me, what was your 4 years there like?
Magical.
Wow, that's a great way to
Magical.
describe medical school. I don't know too many people that would describe it that way.
No, I mean, well, I think that tough. Of course, tough, but there's like good and bad. I mean, medical school is no one's going to tell you that like it was hard. So no one's going to tell you that medical school is easy. I'm not saying that it was easy. Maybe a better way to say it is that there was a lot of opportunity at Ohio State. And I was very fortunate to be able to take advantage of some of those opportunities at Ohio State. Medical school is hard. I can't even lie to you. I'm not gonna act like I didn't sit here and get my butt kicked in the first 2 years. Definitely happened. Times where I actually remember coming in and feeling like I was on top of the world and no one could I had reinvented the wheel and discovered something new. And then, I'm taking these tests and I'm like, oh, actually I'm not as hard as I thought I was. So that I don't think that's not necessarily what I'm saying, but I think it's the setup that I had at Ohio State. There was a lot of opportunity for it was almost like being the opportunity for and access to resources was there, I guess is the most important thing. And I've had a lot of colleagues from different institutions, tell me otherwise, where there aren't even certain programs or departments at their medical school or, with their affiliated hospital. When I was in M1, they encouraged us, if you want to do plastic surgery, go talk to the plastic surgery people. And the research was just there. The department was just there. Shadowing was there. Emergency medicine is there. Family medicine is there. Radiology, I mean, it was all there. You literally, from the first day you stepped on, could talk to any department and it was all there. So that was something and the programs were very strong as well. So I think that that's maybe more so what I was kind of suggesting with that last statement. It was very challenging in the first 2 years. We had I want to say it was an 18-month curriculum before we took step one. I think it was 8 exams in 18 months to prepare ourselves. It was a very rigorous course, but I think they did a good job of preparing us. So that was that. And then of course, your third and fourth years where you prepare for clinicals or where you do your clinical rotations, you do your OSCEs, et cetera, so on and so forth, followed by your fourth year. I think it was ultimately, all in all, I would say it was good. I don't want to ramble too much, but I think it was a good academic institution. The other thing that I'll note and suggest, or I'll note really quickly, is that at the time when I was applying to Ohio State, one of the reasons, so I said erroneous, but that's actually very misleading. One of the biggest draws to Ohio State when I was applying was the fact that there was this list that came out every single year. I remember it actually now, for the most enrolled African-American students at a medical school, at a non-HBCU medical school. And I remember, of course, applying to all HBCUs because community is important, but I remember this mission of diversity or this them suggesting diversity in around something that they really appreciated, and then their numbers actually backing it up. And then also knowing who the dean was or the dean of admission was at Ohio State, that was something that was very attractive to me, knowing that if I came to this school, that there were going to be a lot of people that looked like me there. So there was going to be some level of community there. I said erroneous, but that was a really, really big pull.
Do you remember where Ohio State fell on that list?
They were number 2.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you remember who was
UConn or UCLA was number 1, and Ohio State was number 2.
Wow. Amazing.
At the time, yeah.
Amazing. You were extremely involved. I've reviewed your resume in terms of your leadership while you were at the Ohio State, and you were president of no less than 3 organizations. At least 2,
yeah.
For sure. Was it Black Men in Medicine and also heads up president at the very least, and then chair of several other organizations. Can you talk about how you balanced that?
Yeah, I think that it kind of all goes back to this idea, this notion of not wanting to be boxed into one singular mode or category. And coming into medical school, because I felt like there was just so much that they were providing, so many opportunities, it was like eye candy kind of every single day. These groups are coming in kind of, selling themselves to you or to the M1s and, to join, and people being excited in the rush and things that you identify with. And maybe I took it a little, over, the hump or whatever. But yeah, Black Men in Medicine definitely was something that I thought was really important. And really, I think what I found myself doing, honestly, Prisca, was participating in things that I really was passionate about. So Black Men in Medicine, of course, because
You're a Black man in
honestly,
medicine.
when I first came to medical school, I sought for community. So the other Black men in medicine, those were some of the people that were my mentors when I first started and still are my mentors now. Heads Up, Health Education and Developmental Services for underprivileged populations, making sure that underprivileged populations have access was something that I was very passionate about. And I still am very passionate about. Athletes in Medicine was another program that I co-chair of. And I think that maybe stemmed from my background in athletics and wanting to maybe reserve some ties to that and maybe even explore some networking opportunities with the athletic department at Ohio State. I think all the things that I was doing, it was a lot of them. So I think that was probably, something that became stressful at times because I assumed so many different roles. But I think all of them made sense along the way. And with my story, with my journey, they were things that I, in some way, shape, or form, had some experience with, had some relationship with, and wanted to either keep ties with or, continue to pursue moving forward.
Amazing. Totally amazing.
I don't know how I did them all.
I still struggle because I think I did one extracurricular when I was in medical school, and that just about took me out. I still don't know, can't even begin to fathom how you were able to balance all of these and still do as well as you did, because you were a very strong medical student.
I appreciate that.
So you're done now with medical school at this point. You've graduated and
Uh,
you're now at Johns Hopkins. Can you talk about how you made the decision? What made you interested in the institution that you're at now? And what are some of your career aspirations at this point? How did PGY 1 year go? And how is PGY 2 year going?
mhm. So backstepping, Ohio State was an incredible institution. I love my alma mater, or the Ohio State University College of Medicine. I have nothing but great words to say about that place and might consider it a fellowship. Who knows? Not sure yet. But the decision for me to ultimately choose Hopkins, I think, was probably a point in my life, maybe, where I had decided, I had taken a step back and thought about where I had done my academic training for the last several years. So Virginia, James Madison University was in Virginia, about 6 hours away. And then Ohio State was 8 hours away, driving, both of them. And
From Jersey,
not
I'm
getting
assuming.
from Jersey, yeah, from our house, and not getting any younger, definitely. And I think that one of the primary things that was important to me was because of the fact, and at this time, I think everyone, like the six of us, were still like in some proximity to New Jersey. So I had never trained close
You mean
to
our
home.
siblings, the six of us?
Our siblings, yeah. I had never trained close to home. And it's important, of course, to take advantage of like the best opportunities that come and, make sure that, there's a lot of decisions, but I think that was one of the things primarily, honestly, that I think was really important for me. I wanted to make sure that if anything, for unforeseen, and nothing had happened, but for any unforeseen reason or circumstance, something had happened, I knew that like I at least had access or the capacity to get home in an appropriate amount of time. Or if somebody wanted to visit me for whatever reason, they now had access to visit me. Not that they couldn't visit me 8 hours away. You guys did visit me and you guys did come to Virginia as well, but it's so much easier to come to Baltimore than it is to Columbus, Ohio. So that was a big reason, definitely. I would say the other reason is because Hopkins is a powerhouse, specifically with internal medicine. It's a very strong internal medicine program. And for someone like me looking to pursue fellowship, I thought that I wanted to make sure, I thought that it made sense to shoot high, aim high probably, and maybe step out of my comfort zone a little bit into maybe a new like stratosphere, if you will. And yeah, learn from some of the most reputable clinicians in the country. So that's kind of how that started. The way that I got here was by taking a step back and thinking about places that I think made sense. I thought about some places in New York, and it was a way rotation. I thought about places in New York. I thought about places in like neighboring areas, and ultimately decided there were two places that I thought made sense or a good proximity to home that I felt like would make sense. And so I ended up doing two aways, one in Philadelphia, and then I did another away in Baltimore, I think about a month or 2 months after, to see like which one made a better fit, basically.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And so how's your time there going so far?
It's going good. I mean, medicine, residency, there's a steep learning curve, I would definitely say, with medicine. And I felt that. I definitely felt that coming in, learning how to, one, put in the orders, two, make your plans, three, just be efficient on a daily basis. And then I think just like the schedule, it's like you're working now versus studying every day. It's like this is an actual job and it's tough. It's a tough job. And you're being asked things that you've never been asked before. Sometimes you don't even have the answers and people are asking you questions that are quite literally life-changing. And so it's uncomfortable. It's a lot of growing pains, I think, in the first year and even probably in the second year as well. Really, training is growing pains. That's really what it is. But I would say that there are less growing pains maybe in the second year than in the first year. Things I think are a lot smoother now that I, one, know like how to get around the hospital, and two, have a little bit of experience, I think, under my belt. that's something that's also great. So I feel more confident this year. When I talk to attendings or when I talk to patients, I understand the plan a little bit more. I have my own, like decisions that I go about. I know the dosages for certain medications, the physiology for certain things, I think just ultimately makes more sense. And I just feel like a more well-equipped physician, I think, this year than last year. And I only see myself getting better with every rotation that goes by. So I think that there's been a really good support system here at Hopkins. People are really nice. The opportunities are definitely, as advertised. Had a bunch of opportunities for research and I'm taking advantage of them as well. I am proactive in my journey and I'm not somebody that's reactive to the things coming at me. No, 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 no. I am very proactive in my journey. I'm making sure that I am the captain of my fate. So yeah, that's where I am with things. I would say right now it's going good all in all. I got about a year to apply to fellowship, cardiology fellowship, cardiovascular medicine, and we'll see how that goes.
Talk about how you came to the decision that you wanted to do cards, because initially, I remember you were very staunch on the idea of doing orthopedic surgery, and
Yeah,
that changed. So, how
yeah,
did that change? Where did the change come in?
yeah. Changed early on too. It was like my first year in medical school, it changed. I think ortho, honestly, if I'm looking back on it, was me just not really knowing what I was saying. Probably not really know what I was saying. I think part of it was, oh, well, I had my injuries. It was an orthopedic surgeon. That probably helped me. So I want to be an orthopedic surgeon. Therefore, X happened. Therefore, Y at NZ. Like that was kind of what it was. And, one of the things that I learned in medical school that was actually pretty interesting or pretty funny was that I really had no idea what I was talking about. I didn't know anything. It turns out I really didn't actually know anything about medicine at all. I didn't really know what a dermatologist was. I didn't really know what a radiologist was. I didn't know what an internist was. I didn't know any of that stuff. I just knew what a surgeon was. I knew what a surgeon just sounds cool. And you just kind of do what sounds cool. But it turns out that, doing what sounds cool isn't necessarily the best thing for you. Like you have to do it and make sure that it's something that you actually like, because it turns out that if it is the case that you choose neurosurgery or orthopedic surgery or psychiatry, you have to actually do the residency and then be a neurosurgeon. It's not like you just match that and then you get a no, like you have to do that. So I remember my first year of medical school, going through our medical school system-based system. It was system-based. So, for example, if we were in the cardiopulm block, we were trained or we learned through cardiologists. If we were in MSK, we learned by orthopedic surgeons. So it was very ironic, actually, that we had done MSK, I think maybe in December, like our third block in medical school. And then right after that was cardiopulm, which is cardiology and pulmonary systems. So I did MSK and we were in an anatomy lab doing origin insertion, action, innervation. And I remember just being in the anatomy lab, like, this is so boring. Oh my God. Actually, I'm actually not having fun. Like, is this what like I was saying I wanted to? I was so disappointed. And not because orthopedic surgery is not a good field, but I didn't realize that like what I learned about myself is that I actually am somebody that truly enjoys physiology.
Physiology.
Like
Yeah.
physiology is what makes me, it excites me. So that was one thing. It's ironic that right after that, we had cardiopulm, which is like notoriously known as like the hardest block in your M1 year. And we started learning about, like lungs, we started learning about the heart, and we started learning about hemodynamics and just, yeah, cardiologists training us. And I remember being so disappointed after that block, but then just being so excited in this new block and learning hemodynamics and conceptually understanding how the heart works. It was so systematic to me. You could very easily predict what was going to happen to somebody in a question stem based on the physiology that was going on, like aortic regurgitation versus, stenosis versus the diastole. And I mean, all of these things, it's extremely predictable. The research was plenty. I had started seeing different types of procedures and stuff that they would advertise or they would suggest or show as cases, some of our case reports or our clinical stems and stuff. And I was like, wow, it's pretty cool. I think the icing on the cake for me was transparently, so the dean of admission, Dr. Quinn Capers, was actually a cardiologist and he was a Black man. And he was the man, the myth, the legend at Ohio State. And he had this lecture, I will never forget it, on ACS, acute coronary syndrome. He was an interventional cardiologist, actually, on acute coronary syndrome, where part of the lecture was actually him describing another Black man that looked like him, that was probably in his, like, I want to say either his late 30s or early 40s, that had a heart attack. and had a wife and had kids and didn't even realize he was having a heart attack. That was rushed to the hospital, and they took care of him. And Dr. Kivers came up to him and said, we're going to take care of this. We're going to make sure that you get through this, and stented him and, said, Mr. So-and-so, the heart attack is over, and gave him a hug. And the guy was just like inconsolable at like how a man saved his life through intervention, but then also it was like a black man. It's just like another black man just kind of saving another black man's life by way of the disease that kills the most people in the country every single year. It's literally the number one killer of people in America every single year. I thought that was so beautiful. And then, I think Dr. Quinn Capers as a role model and a figure just in general, just so much respect for him. In a way, I kind of wanted to be him, to be honest with you. I think that it was that idea of like role models. Like he was somebody that I saw very early on that was doing something that I thought was really, really cool, that I, for myself, kind of took a step back and understood and saw that I thought was really, really cool. And then decided, I was like, maybe this is something that I actually want to consider. Maybe this is actually something that I want to pursue, like interventional cardiology. I'd never heard of that before, but, stenting people and left heart cath. So I started looking into it. And I started, shadowing people and, got on the cath lab and fluoroscopy, all these things, like angiograms, and all of a sudden I'm like a kid in a candy crystal. So I'm like, wow, it was crazy. This is crazy. What the heck? I didn't even realize that this was like a specialty. This was a field. And I was like, nah, baby, cardiology.
That's where it's
cardiology. Yeah, this is where it's at. And that was like my M1 year. And now I'm a second year resident and I still want to be a cardiologist after that exposure in my first year of medical school.
That's incredible. And I mean, the excitement is palpable. That's just great to see. Well, Dr. Osuji, I think we're getting to the end of our talk here. I do like to end these talks with 2 questions on a larger scale, as in, do you have any recommendations, advice to our listeners? We have a lot of trainees, medical students, just folks that are interested in hearing a little bit about a less than traditional or less than conventional path that might be open to applying some of your insights to their own lives. And do you have any projects in the works? I mean, you said that you're kind of working on your path, not only to just cardiology fellowship, but ultimately interventional cards fellowship. So what does that path look like? Do you have any other endeavors that you're working on? You're pretty big in the social media space. And I personally, just because by way of my own personal insights, know that you're very much into public speaking. So maybe if you can talk about that and how that's showing up in your day-to-day.
Yeah. The first thing I'll say as advice, I don't want to be shallow, but I do want to be encouraging and saying truly to anybody that's hearing, I really, really want you to listen and hear the words that I'm saying more than anything, and as well as the message. But I truly do believe that where there is a will, a will, a will, a will. If you have a will, there's a way. If you don't have a will, then it's going to be really tough to make things happen. There's going to be a lot of times just in life, honestly, where people tell you that things are just not going to happen for you. I remember talking to one of my advisors in college and just, saying things that you didn't really want to hear. Sometimes, and really at any step of the way. When I applied to the NIH, people, some pretty not nice messages that I got in return as response messages or in response. Some people here, at Hopkins or, some people at Ohio State, there's always going to be somebody that feels like you're inadequate or feels like you don't belong. But it's less of them than it's more so up to you, I would say, to take the words and choose whatever it is that you want to dissect out of that to create your story and to create your path. If you are somebody that feels like you are, after kind of hearing something or, saying something is enough to break you, then it's going to be really tough. But I think that so long as you have a fighting spirit, so long as you understand that this path is one whereby you don't just come and you're not going to be 40-0. You're not just going to be and through the journey of medicine or even the journey of life. You need to expect that you're going to be hit. It's really about how well you're able to tolerate a punch. And even when you get knocked down, it's about being able to recover. It's the recovery. It's the bend. It's the capacity to bend when you're hit with adversity, because medicine is literally by way just adversity. all day, every day. It's not going to go perfect every single. You're going to have a lot of wins, and there are going to be a lot of moments that you cherish, and you're going to be really proud of yourself. A lot of times to pat yourself on the back, but it's this understanding that it's an audacious field that you're going into. You're telling somebody that you are a doctor, like you are literally assuming the care of somebody's life. So it calls for a lot of responsibility. It's a whole entire ordeal to get here. So don't be somebody that feels like, well, I didn't get it the first time. I won't be a doctor. Like I saw a lot of people like that in college where like you don't do well in organic chemistry and all of a sudden like now you're not a doctor. That's crazy to me. Or you didn't match into plastic surgery one time and now all of a sudden you're not a plastic surgeon. And that to me is not the right way to go about it. I think it's you take the lessons from it, you dissect what it is from it, and there's a level of humility that you need to accept always and forever. I think humility is the way to go in these situations, and it's just figuring out like how to recreate a situation that gives you the best leverage to get to further your journey or further your goals. So where there's a will, there's a way. Definitely, if there's no will, it's going to be really tough. In terms of projects, yeah, I mean, I am doing some research right now at Hopkins. Actually, it's funny that I said interventional cardiology. I would probably take a step back and maybe just say general cardiology right now, because general cardiology and then interventional cardiology. And I'm still doing a lot of self-exploration. Don't want to do what I did like I did in medical school and be too narrow-minded without, a little bit more self-exploration. So came here knowing that I definitely want to do cardiology, but I'm also exploring in the field of cardiology. So sports cardiology is something else that I've actually also found recently that I didn't even realize was a field that I think is very exciting. And I've gone to a couple clinics with some of my mentors here, but interventional cardiology is also there because I'm not interested in that at the time being. I'm very interested in it, but I'm doing self-exploration and I'm doing a research in both fields to see what all makes sense.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Osuji. Really appreciate all of your amazing insights and sharing your journey with us, and know that we're looking forward to the incredible journey that you have ahead and hopefully hearing more in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you, sister. I appreciate it. Thank you for guidance. Thank you for your leadership.
Oh
Thank you
my
for being the best person
goodness. Oh my
in the
goodness.
world. It was great being on your podcast. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity and the space to share a platform, to share my story. It's something that I appreciate. Public speaking is something that I really enjoy.
Oh, we didn't even get to talk about that.
Yeah. Oh,
your
you want something?
Yeah, sure. I love when people share kind of what they're doing outside of their careers as physicians.
Yeah. So I think that I love my story. I think it's a very unique story. I think it's one that is worth hearing, not just friends and family. I think it's one that could really sell and could really impact. I think that there's like a high capacity for impact with my story. And so I try and share it when I can. I think that, some of my life experiences between like just like leadership, sports, and then like being a physician is interesting. It's exciting. So yeah, like I said, I try and share those stories. I try and share that narrative whenever I can. And then public speaking, it's actually interesting because I was pretty shy growing up.
You were very
But
shy.
forcibly maybe,
Oh my goodness.
probably forcibly by way of leadership, kind of grew into this role of kind of being forced to talk in front of large audiences, and I've taken a liking to it. And so it's another thing that I seek out whenever I have the chance or an opportunity to speak in front of a large audience to motivate them. Motivate specifically is usually where I go to motivate them or to talk to them, encourage them. I really enjoy doing that. So in my free time, whenever I have time, when opportunities present themselves, that's something that I do outside of medicine.
Yes, and you are quite remarkable at it, if I may say so myself.
I appreciate it.
He is all over social media. You can go follow him. He is honest_Ev.
Yes.
If folks are interested in looking into some of his work, he recently did a very amazing talk on his path. Very, very remarkable. Thank you again, Dr. Osuji. And thank you to our listeners for tuning into this episode of Resilience MD. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with anyone who you think might benefit. You can follow us on all platforms. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. We may not have much up yet, but we're growing. And until next time, keep pushing forward and stay resilient.